Let's open up the Vintage Collection Captain Cassian Andor figure from Rogue One VC130.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. We have quite a back catalogue of vintage collection figures waiting to be opened, but sometimes those shiny new ones just jump ahead of the queue. This one is actually a reissue. This one is VC130, so an older number, but we were never able to find this one locally, so we were really excited to see it being reissued in the modern vintage collection line for 2024, so we can finally add them to our collection, because of course I'm sure you will remember those, shall we say, quirky figures that came out around 2016 for the Rogue One collection, those 5-point of articulation figures. They weren't that great, so definitely keen to replace some of the figures, or at least have better versions alongside it. I do have the original version of this particular version of Andor from the film that came with the U-Wing for a bit of a comparison. I'm sure it's going to be a bit of a laugh, but it's still going to be interesting to see how much better this one is. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get the figure off the backing card so we can check out all of the details and accessories. But first, let's take one last look at the backing card. The Vintage Collection line packaging is obviously heavily inspired by the original Kenner packaging for the vintage figures from the 70s and 80s. We have the black rectangular backing card, the Star Wars logo adjoining the chrome racetrack surrounding the character art here. We have the Rogue One logo in red, and for Cassian Andor, we have a green accent color behind the nameplate and behind the figure. This particular version is labeled as Captain Cassian Andor in black text, and we can see the action figure there with 3 accessories. I really like the promotional image here of Diego Luna from the film. Nice and clear, well lit. We can see a lot of the costume details, which I really like. Moving on to the back, this is the 2024 reissue of VC130, so the backing card is different to the original. The original versions has that black background with the preview image of the other figures from the wave. This one here has that accent color stripe here. It's in green with a picture of the front of the backing card, and interestingly, an image of the action figure posed with his accessories. So of course in the film we know that Cassian uses a blaster rifle. We can see some of the pieces there, and the back image shows how we can assemble them to form his blaster rifle, which is really kind of cool. We've got a bit of a blurb here for Captain Cassian Andor. It reads, Captain Cassian Andor commands respect from his rebel troops with his ability to keep a cool head under fire and complete his missions with minimal resources. And we have that blurb repeated in a few different languages. We've got the Vintage Collection logo down here, and the rest of the card back is grey, just the standard sort of copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff there on the back. Not too interesting. Overall, I really like this backing card. It's got a cool vintage style, obviously for the Vintage Collection. Of course, I'm going to be keeping this backing card like I do with all of my Vintage Collection cards, but let's get the action figure out so we can check out all of the details. Now I have Captain Cassian Andor and his 3 accessories out of the packaging so we can take a closer look. And I really do like the level of detail that we can get with the facial likeness and printing these days. We've got such fine detail for his facial hair. Of course, he's got a really distinctive look. I really like the detail on this figure. We've got some sculpted here. This looks like it is sculpted as part of the head, not a separate piece attached, but we've got a very nice tidy hairline around here. Sometimes in those older figures we'd get it sort of misaligned, so we'd have the hair paint sort of on the skin and vice versa. Some really nice paint application here, and there's really fine digital printing on the face for his beard there. Really nice. They're definitely getting better with the facial likenesses for the actors on these Vintage Collection figures as well. I assume this is a reissue. I don't have the original VC130 to compare alongside, unfortunately, but I do really like the details on this one. So unfortunately I can't compare it to the earlier version to see if they have improved. I know on some of the other recent reissued figures they have improved some of the paint apps, which I do really like. Always just stepping it up just a little bit. We've got Cassian with his brown jacket, a white sort of cream undershirt, and sort of very sort of light green sort of beigey pants there as well. We've got some painted details. We've got silver here on the chest. We've got his sort of rebel rank badge over here, silver with 2 dots. We've got some details here on his belt. Not too much else. Oh, we've got a few more details here on the jacket and the belt around here at the back. We can see that we've got a holster for his weapon, which we're going to test out. And then he's got brown boots with some very, very minor silver paint for the buckles. You can kind of see it catching the light there as well. So not too much paint details. Of course, that is referencing his costume. If it doesn't exist on the original costume, Hasbro's not going to put it on there. But I do really like that face sculpt. Of course, that's sort of always the part of the figure that draws the eye first. So let's check out the articulation. Oh, of course, we've got the painted stripes down the jacket, obviously referencing the sort of the stripes down the jackets that we see in the original trilogy Rebel Heroes. I really like that they sort of included that for Cassian here. Let's check out the articulation. First off, we can see that we've got that sort of middle torso one. And sometimes I'm a little bit mixed on this because it kind of cuts in, especially because he's got such a plain shirt. We can sort of see the line, but for this figure, it doesn't actually bother me too much. If I sort of lean him forward, I can kind of sort of tighten up that seam a little bit. If I bend him back, it looks a little odd. You know, it's not really looking terribly realistic. If I lean him forward, it joins up a little bit. So I'm not really sure that we necessarily get an advantage from the sculpting. You know, we can lean him back, but then we get this sort of awkward gap. The jacket here is a bit rubbery, which is good because, of course, if it was stiff, we wouldn't really be able to do this much at all. And it is hitting the back here, so it's not really giving us a lot of flexibility, a little bit backwards and forwards, but I can actually sort of open the jacket so we can see the details of his shirt underneath. So I like that it's kind of separate. It's sculpted like a vest because it's not attached to the sleeves. You can sort of see it flexing there. I like it when they use sort of different materials so that we've still got a little bit of movement here. We can see that we've got a pretty good clearance here at the shoulders. Let's test that out. I'm hoping it'll just pop up underneath. Yep, I can get fully all the way up there with his arms, which is good. He's actually got fairly slender arms. He doesn't have any sort of armor or anything like that. So I'm expecting some pretty good rotation. The one thing is of course, because this is sort of rubbery, it's a little wider. So I can see that shirt underneath, which I don't think would actually happen because this is supposed to be a jacket, not a vest. These sleeves are supposed to be part of this. So theoretically, I shouldn't be able to see that through there, but I understand there has to be some allowances for getting these components onto the figure. So there's always going to be just a little bit of room around it. So I can see that undershirt when he's got his arms all the way up. Of course, once he's got his sort of arms down, it's completely hidden, and I don't see that in there at all, so that's not really going to bother me. We can see the articulation clearly here at the elbows, but it does do a pretty good job of hiding in the sort of ripple sort of texture around the jacket elbows. I like the way it comes down here at the side. We do get a reasonable sort of continuation of that sort of stripe there. It does kind of cut off at an angle and then start again, but of course, as soon as we sort of interrupt that line, it is going to look a little bit different. We can see that we can swing the arms up there, so looks pretty good. The articulation there at the inner elbows does completely hide away. This one's a little stiff. There we go. We can get his arms up, and I can't get his arms up very tight. They're going to stop about there. I'm not going to get in that much sort of tighter on this angle, but I can rotate them in so we can get sort of a two-handed pose. I can rotate his hands. We can see a little bit of the articulation on the back of the hand. He's got an extended trigger finger there. So I can get quite a lot of movement from this hand. We can see that articulation point is actually quite flexible. Some characters wearing sleeves, the jackets and things like that kind of extend down a little bit and stop us from really moving the hands a lot. We can see the articulation point on this hand as well. On the back of the hand there. This one is a little bit stiff, but I can also get a pretty good range of movement there. We've just got sort of a classic tight C grip on this one. I can get my fingernail in there and sort of bend back the finger, but that is quite a tight grip. That's definitely going to take a little bit of sort of wriggling around to get that hand to hold anything. But the fingers are flexible, which is good. I want a nice grip around accessories, especially these smaller ones compared to those big chunky ones of old. Definitely want a good grip for the smaller accessories so we don't lose them. I can kind of wiggle the the belt around, but it is permanently sort of attached at this point. The strap is sculpted onto his leg, so I can't move it around, and it is rubbery. I can squish that in, so hopefully that will hold the blaster well. We've got a little bit of sort of, I kind of wish it was just a little bit higher, and I can't quite nudge it. I can kind of wiggle him to the side because I can see the top of his hip there, and I just kind of wish this was attached a little higher to hide that. I know that that might affect his articulation and movement to be completely covering that, but let's test it out on this side. So I can get out to that side. We can see that we've also got that, that top of the thigh articulation point there, and it does move. It's kind of tight. I got to hold him still at the top, and I can just get that bit to move there. And we've got pretty good sculpting details on the pants coming down here. We can see that we've got pockets. I like the way that it comes down really wrinkled. It sort of does a pretty good job of hiding articulation points. We can see that we can get to about there before that's going to stop. The articulation at the ankle is quite high up on the boot. You can see it there. It's not down, so I'm getting to get to about there. That's not really that much movement. Sometimes the ankle sort of attachment points feel, I don't want to say flimsy, but I'm really worried about sort of tipping them much on TVC figures. So generally speaking, I don't use the articulation at the ankles much. But that is barely anything there. I can just sort of feel it clicking backwards and forwards. Because of where they've done it, you can see I can kind of rotate there. But there's not really, I can get to about there. Not a lot of movement there. But yeah, pretty cool. I'm curious, the holster on this leg is fixed in place. So there's not really going to be much going on here at all. I'm not really going to be able to rotate it around because I feel like this is glued in. I can see sort of like a peg, but I'm not going to test that theory and see if I can sort of pull it out and sort of, you know, perhaps adjust it. I feel like that is supposed to be firmly attached. So I'm not really going to get much in the way of rotation because I'm going to start to pull across here, and I'm not really getting much in the way of a backwards and forwards. So I'm not really going to get him into some adventurous poses because of where this has attached. I thought it might just be free floating and just sort of have this sculpted so it kind of looks like it's attached, but that is fully attached. That's on there. So that leg is not really doing that much articulation apart from the knees and the lower legs. But overall, for me personally, most of my TVC figures are standing upright, so it's not really going to affect me too much. But if you like getting into some cool diorama poses, he's going to be a little bit limited with that leg because of his holster. It is a bit of a bigger holster, I have to say. Not as slimline as some of the ones that I've seen. It also has a hole going all the way through. So let's check out his accessories because, of course, as we could see on the back of the backing card, these three pieces are going to assemble into his blaster rifle. So we've got this part here from the front. We can see that we've sort of got the emitter here, we've got a bit of a scope here, and we've got an attachment sort of hole here. And we've got these little bits here that are going to sort of extend and sort of hug on to the second part. So this one doesn't exist as a sort of a blaster on its own. It's sort of like the scope and lengthening for the barrel. This is the sort of the main little blaster. So if you don't want it in the rifle configuration, we've got this tiny little blaster pistol that we can use instead. And I will test this out in the holster and with Cassian holding this one before I assemble it, because this is going to be the part that is going to attach into this. And I get the feeling that might be a one-way trip. I'm not sure how easily I'm going to be able to get that out, so I'm not going to test that just yet. And then of course we have the third piece, which is the stock that's going to go on the end. So this one does have a bit of a shape to the attachment point, so it's going to go up a specific way, and that's going to attach there on the end. So I think that that's kind of fun. Sometimes I wish that they would just give us multiple accessories so we can mix and match without having to pull them apart, because this is a very small piece of plastic. If this breaks, you cannot assemble all three pieces together to make his accessory as pictured on the back of the backing card. I kind of wish they just gave us the blaster rifle and a blaster pistol. We only need this piece of plastic twice in order to do that. I kind of wish that we just had that. It's pretty small. There's not a lot of paintwork going on with these accessories. We can see this part has a little bit of a difference in color tone. We've got some sort of browns and silvers going on. I do like the paintwork on this. So this is the most complicated piece out of the three. They would only have to give us one of this and one of his blaster pistol. But let's just test it in the holster in his hand, and then we'll assemble those three pieces. I'm expecting this to go in there pretty easily because we can see that there's kind of a bit of a gap around it. It's not as tight. I was expecting it to be quite a tight fit because this is so rubbery. We've got the little emitter kind of sticking through there at the bottom. And yeah, because we're not really going to be putting a blaster rifle on his hip, so I'm not quite sure why it is this size. You can see it does have some sort of detail down the side that needs to fit in there, but I honestly thought it was going to be a bit of a tighter fit. It's not going to be hard at all to get that out. So it's kind of interesting that that holster is that big for this particular blaster. It's got a very small grip with an enclosed trigger guard, which I'm hoping is not going to be too hard to get into Cassian's hand here. So he can move his fingers out of the way so I can get that in there, and a little bit of a pivot around, and I can get his finger in there quite nicely. You can see how well that finger protrudes through. A really nice grip there. Really nice. Oh, I wish they gave us two of these because I like being able to sort of swap accessories around, and I just get the feeling once I put this into his blaster rifle configuration, I'm not going to want to pull it apart because I don't want to break this little part here. And also it kind of looks like this part is painted to me, which is odd that you would paint a section that's going to be sort of connected to the others. This looks like this has silver painted on the end compared to the rest of the plastic. But that is the attachment point for the other one, which could potentially get scratched or damaged if you're going to be sort of attaching and swapping those accessories around. I do just like the way this looks, but I'm probably going to be using his blaster rifle in that sort of configuration. So let's take that out of his hand and connect these. And I'm kind of nervous about this. I do think it looks pretty cool. Okay, so here goes. Let's get this in. Okay, it didn't sort of snap in, but it goes in there kind of nicely. On mine, I can kind of see the color difference. It's probably going to look perhaps not as bad once I get all three parts together. So let's connect these up. Okay, that bit on the end, that's you can see it's a really short attachment point. That is easy to take on and off. And I've got a little bit of a wiggle there. But now we can see that we've got the full accessory assembled, and you can kind of see where the three parts are. I'm just gonna because I'm curious. Let's see. Okay, that is stiff. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I can disassemble it, but I'm probably not going to be wanting to do that too many times because it is painted on that attachment point, and potentially that paint has made that sort of grip on a little bit more, because paint just adds just that little bit of extra diameter to that, because this part is a little bit, I feel like this is going to pop off when I'm trying to put it in Cassian's hand as well, because it just comes off so easily. That is going to get knocked around. So there we go. Okay, so it should be the same sort of grip, and you know what, I'm just going to take this off and put this back in his hand and get his fingers out of the way. I click that in there, and then I can go and put this on because I feel like that's just going to get knocked off. So there we go. Looks pretty good once it's all in his hand. And I'm curious because his fingers are very tight, so it's definitely going to take a little bit of finagling. Oh, there we go. Okay, so his thumb kind of bends out, and I can get him to hold on to the underside there. So I can get him into a pretty good two-handed position there. It's not too bad overall. I do kind of wish it was just a solid accessory, so I don't need to worry about this kind of breaking, because it's kind of, you can see it's, this stock is kind of resting on his hand. It kind of wants to bend just a little bit up there. It looks just a little bit awkward. I'm definitely going to spend a bit of time working on sort of improving that, but he does hold it. That's pretty cool. So overall, I think this is a pretty good figure. Again, I just kind of wish Hasbro would give us multiples of the accessories. I often mention this with characters that come with lightsabers. I just want, you know, like for the Black series especially, I want the hilts and lit lightsabers. They could do that for the TVC as well. Just give us a hilt, you know, and a lightsaber as well. So that we've got multitudes of accessories. They're such small pieces of plastic. I don't think it would increase the cost. So there we go. He's pretty cool. Definitely really good likeness there. But of course, one of the things that we do want to check out is how it fares alongside the 2016 version. Now this particular one came in a couple of different ways. This one was with the U-wing vehicle. There was another version that came with a Stormtrooper figure, I believe, that was a Toys R Us exclusive, I think from Recollection, because that was not available for us here in New Zealand. So this is the one that came with the U-wing, and unfortunately Rogue One suffered from the 5-point of articulation error. So if we just take a quick look at the face on this one, honestly, we did put up with a lot during that era, didn't we? We bought all the figures in the 5-point of articulation era because I loved Rogue One. I wanted the figures, but this is what has been in my Rogue One display all these years. He's got a really chunky accessory that just kind of sits in that holster. I honestly didn't mind not having too much articulation in the legs, but you do really see it in the arms. And that face. The sculpting and the paintwork on the face wasn't great. So let's take a little bit of a side-by-side here with the new TVC. And we can see, especially around eyes, we don't get those sort of white, googly eyes. We've got this so much better. The beard, we can, I don't know if the camera can see this, the dots were really, really visible on sort of the beard paint application on that older version there. It's a lot more fine. Almost to the point where your eye can't really focus on it, not without like a magnifying glass. The hair sculpt does actually look really similar, which is kind of funny. Bit of a glossier hair for the older figure. This one's a little bit more of a matte finish. We can see a lot of the similar details in terms of the costume. To be honest, the way that this one sort of is sculpted on the leg means that it's a lot more slimline and closer to the leg compared to this one. This one actually has a lot more of an action figure feel because we've got this rubbery, larger holster that's kind of sculpted separately, so it sits a little bit further out. This one's actually slimline, which I kind of like, but clearly it doesn't really fit that blaster. And both of them are kind of big in terms of sort of holsters. I think it's sort of interesting that they're so different in shape and size, yet they would be using the same costume reference material. So I'm kind of curious why this one, it looks sort of wide, but then sort of short and shallow at the same time. It's just kind of an interesting look there. And obviously it has to sit over the articulation rather than just being sculpted on top like this one is. We can see there from the details. Slight difference in color as well. We can see a lot of those same sort of details there. Looking at it from the back, because there is a difference in the plastics, there is an oh so subtle difference in the browns here. Because this is rubbery, used for sort of the main body, and then the sleeves are hard, under these lights, I can just make out a really subtle difference, and it's generally a little bit more visible when I compare it to next to this one. When I'm just looking at it like this, I don't really see that color difference when I sort of put this one off to the side there. But yeah, such a massive difference in terms of just, yeah, a few differences. This one looks just a little bit more on the skinny, slender side, and you can even see that in some of the details with like the rank badge looks bigger on this one. It just kind of shows the difference in scale, even though they are essentially the same technical scale, 3.75 inch. If I sort of stand this one up like he was on the base, he's a tiny bit taller, probably better proportioned alongside other figures there. This one also doesn't have much in the way of sort of additional paint details. No paint details there on the buckles, very minimal on the belt as well, and very different, yeah, just in terms of the sculpting details. I can see the little dome details on this one's belt, but they're not accented with silver like this one is. So overall, a big step up. I'm really glad. Obviously, I'm not going to sell this one. It is going to stay in my collection because it is nostalgic. It came with the U-wing. I don't like splitting vehicles and figures up, but he's probably going to go a little bit more towards the back now that I have this much improved vintage collection version. And I'm so happy that Hasbro reissued it because he is a main character from Rogue One. It definitely helps out collectors like myself that were never able to find that original release. So really happy there. I'm so excited to finally get season 2 of Andor. I'm hoping we're going to get lots of new Captain Cassian Andor figures from that show. I really want to build out my Rogue One series because I'm going to put my Andor figures right alongside my Rogue One figures, and I want to be able to put these 5-point of articulation ones towards the back and sort of replace them, as it were, with these new versions. Really happy with this guy. Just kind of wish they gave us a blaster and a rifle so that I could use the two without having to sort of pull them apart. But I do like that we've got those options there. This one just came with that one little blaster pistol there, nothing else. So really happy with this figure. That was a fun uncarding there. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars vintage collection figure and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details and having a little bit of a laugh comparing it to an older version there. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a TVC fan, I recently opened the 2024 reissue of the Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot VC158. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.